All right, let's record. Yay, we figured it out. All right, so one day we'll do Facebook, another time. Today is not that day.
Think I
So
peaked your
thank
temperament
you
now.
for your patience. Hopefully, if I see other people join, I'll try to let them in. Hopefully, they were able to see the link in the Facebook group. Okay, so I'm really excited today because we have one of my favorite people with us, Jaclyn Goldis. So as you know, my whole mission as a coach is all about helping women find their purpose. And basically, if that involves making a career transition into a more soul aligned career, that's what I do, right? Uh, and I personally made that transition from being a lawyer at a big firm into doing something that I wanted to do differently, right? And so what's really exciting for me about this is that Jaclyn also made a transition from being a lawyer at a big firm into doing something absolutely incredible, which I'm going to let her share with you. But her story is different than mine, right? Her story is, it's a different journey. It's really, really an amazing story. So I'm really excited for her to share that with us. She is a published novelist now. She's going to tell us a little bit more about her book towards the end. But I just want to get started by saying again, thank you for joining us, Jaclyn. And let's just dive on in. Can I just ask you a few questions?
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for having me. I think actually I saw when I was clicking to the group that it's like soul aligned career. Is that, and I just like love that you're doing it. I mean, obviously I feel so passionate about that and about people having that. And so I'm happy to be here. Yeah. And yeah, let's dive in.
Awesome. Okay. So, well, let's just start out with like, when did you know that you wanted to be a novelist? Like when did this kind of clarity in terms of like what you wanted to ultimately do appear to you?
Yeah, I think that, from people I've talked to, that maybe my story is a little bit more unusual on this point because since my earliest memory, this was like the only thing I wanted to do, the thing I wanted to do. I can't remember a time where it's not what I wanted. Um, like the seeds of that have just, yeah, were planted from, I think, birth or before. Um, so I was always writing stories, and even like before I could write, I was like telling stories with animals, like we have that on video. And um it always felt like my path.
Awesome. So, if you always knew that this was your path, what led you to be a lawyer at a big firm for, I think it was like 7 years, right?
Yeah, I was 7+ years. Like I left the year I would go up for partnership, which is a crazy long time to stay in something that isn't your true path or your true passion. I think it's like I guess I think a lot of creatives, there's a lot of stories around being a creative, and they are a lot of lack mindset stories that you can't make money from it. That's not your real job. You get something different and you maybe can do that on the side, or, try for it later. And I feel like that was very much the story of my family, and probably a lot of people's families. And I remember a lot of, my parents and grandparents like saying it was great that I loved writing and they knew I was a good writer, but what are you actually going to do? And I think like, my dad is a Soviet immigrant, and he came to the US with 26 cents and, built himself from nothing. And so I think also, from that immigrant mindset, it's like, yeah, but what are you going to do to make money, because you need to survive? It's like a survival mindset.
Yeah, and I think it's also just that baby boomer generation, like the idea of like, okay, you're either a doctor, a lawyer, or like some type of like business person, and that's
Yeah,
what
100%.
defines
There's no
success.
other yeah, there's no
Yeah.
other options. Those were my options, and it's exactly how I felt. And I was like, definitely not being a doctor. I'm terrible at science and I don't like it. And like calculus numbers, less my thing. It was like, okay, where? And it's funny because, then I in my head I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to law school. Also I like was very fortunate, and I really feel my privilege of like my parents said they would pay for it. I'm not sure that I would have gone otherwise. But in my head I was like, okay, I can go down this path. It's a career where I can make some money, and then I'll save up money, and then I'll take some time off to write. Like that was kind of always what I had in my head. It didn't feel like I was giving up my dream. It felt like I was delaying it.
Or like
And
it was like a step on the, like you were like, I need to save up money so that I can go and do this, right?
yeah. And also, like, I should say, at no time did I stop writing. Like,
Mhm.
I wrote a novel my first novel when I was 17, in high school, and I was trying to get agents. And I remember that was like, I don't know, I think it was even before. No, I mean, there was email, but I think you at that point could send letters, and I had agents calling my house. I mean, it definitely, that book should not have been published, and it was not. But I also wrote another novel in law school. I wrote another one at my law firm. I wrote another book in my law firm. So I definitely didn't stop writing. And I just thought I thought maybe when I was working, I would get an agent. And then I would like, that would be an easy way to leave my job. And it definitely didn't happen that way. But yeah, I did. Oh, and I remember also going to law school that everyone told me, oh my gosh, you can do copyright law and that will fulfill your writing desire, or like, and I did a summer
Yeah.
internship at the Tribune, and I was like, this is awful. I hate copyright law. I definitely don't want copyright law.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Copyright law is not the same thing as being a novelist.
Like literally nothing in common. There's no Venn diagram. There's no middle zone on the Venn diagram.
You might own a laptop. There you go.
Yeah,
That's what
that's
you got
about
in
it.
common.
It involves words, maybe.
Yes.
Um,
So I want to ask you a question. Like, you were there for 7 years. Like, when did you really start to kind of be like, okay, I got to make moves. Like, this is not going well. Like, I need to jump, right? Like the agent didn't happen, but like, I'm still doing this. How did that unfold for you?
yeah. I mean, I think there were a lot of elements. I thought in my head, like at least 3 years. So the first 3 years, I wasn't thinking about it. It was more just like, and I wanted to give myself, maybe this is my parents in my head a little bit, but also something like secure. I wanted to give myself that career to fall back on. And at that point, like I'd gone to law school. So like, let's put in some time so that I could go back to this if I needed to. But I think after the 3 year point was like the roughest point in my life. Like I'd had a breakup. I was so depressed. I felt like I almost didn't even know my real self. Like it felt like my self was a lot of layers and that I'd put on from society and from other people. And I think it really started my like my own journey into personal development and spirituality and mindset and healing. And so I think a lot of that was happening in those years, those like third year of my firm to 7 years. So I was like really working on myself, even though I hadn't left the job. And then I think by the time I hit the year that I was about to go out for a partnership, I feel like I had moved through a lot in my life. And I was really feeling also, we've talked about this, you and I, but I am very much a summer person. And I had seasonal affective disorder. I was in Chicago, and like those winters were really brutal for me. And so, at that point, my job, I like to say I really had the best job in big law because I worked such normal hours for such amazing money. So it was harder, I think, for me than maybe for you. You probably worked like way worse hours than I did. So I think it was a little bit of like a hard thing to like, ooh, am I really gonna, even though I was like, I felt soulless there, but I worked with nice people and I worked good hours.
Yeah,
So
that
I
makes
think
it hard because it wasn't like that bad, right? Like the job
exactly.
itself wasn't like oppressing you. It wasn't like a horrible work culture. But like at the same time, when I think back on my own experience, I don't even know if it was so much about the hours as it was just about like what the hours I spent there took away from me energetically, right? And so then when I would show up in the rest of my life, there just wasn't anything left. And I think that was what was so hard about it.
Yeah, I really relate to that and feel that. But I think what you said is right, that like on one hand, it would have been easier if I worked with really awful people, if I just like absolutely hated what I did, if I was working really long hours, but it wasn't any of that. So I think that made it almost harder. It was like, I'm making so much money. And it's like, what am I like in my head a little bit? It was like, am I really going to give this up for, to chase my like real dreams?
But wait, let's talk about money for a second, because I think one of the biggest barriers that I hear when people are like, oh, I really don't like my corporate job. I want to quit, but like, how will I ever make money? Right. So how did you kind of like deal with that fear and that question?
I think like going back to the fact that I've always known I was meant to be a writer is like, sometimes I think, some beliefs in some areas of your life are easier. Like you have better beliefs from the bat off the bat, and it's easier to like dream bigger maybe in those areas of your life. And I think with my writing, I always had this belief, this like somehow inner knowing that like I was going to make more money writing than I was being a lawyer. Like I really felt that. And I just have always felt like a destiny component with this. So I think leaning on that, and it's a huge like leaning on faith. Like it hasn't happened yet. I mean, I'm making full-time living now on writing, but that hasn't happened yet. But I know it's coming. I know it's going to. And I knew it less then because nothing had happened then. Like I hadn't had any publishing dreams realized. But also I think that time in my life when I was a lawyer too, I was shopping a lot to like fill some voids. And so I think it was like, I don't know, giving up that income, like still made my life is so much richer. So I think I like saw that was a path that was possible. Like I kind of felt like it could be possible. And so like, it's a little bit of a trade-off, but,
Yeah, I totally get that whole piece of like sometimes when you have a job where you're making tons of money, you're also spending tons of money and you're like not really happy. And there's actually like studies out there that show there's sort of like this level of when you're making too little, it can be stressful and that's not fun for anybody.
right.
But there's sort of like a level where above that, the amount of your happiness increasing is not necessarily significant anymore. So
Completely.
with regards to finance, but also just like in general, like what was kind of like the final straw? When were you just like, all right, I'm pulling the trigger, I'm done. How did that go? Did you have a plan? Were you nervous? Like, what was that like, that final moment where you actually quit your job?
About 6 months before I had finished this book, I'd been working out with my dad. So my dad, like I said, is a Soviet immigrant, and I interviewed him for almost 3 years and ended up writing the story of his life and how it changed my life to find out about it. And when I finished that book and we went to Ukraine and Moscow as part of that process, and we had just gone to Moscow as like our finale, and I really just felt like I'm done. Like I felt like I had like I had worked like while I was writing this book, which that at that point that was like a lot. I felt just overdone with work. And I also felt like, okay, now I have this thing I can sell. And so it just felt like the right time. And it felt like the right time to leave Chicago. It felt like the right time in my personal life. But then I realized if I kept working until like October, that was when we could like make our billable hours, and I would get a huge bonus in December. And then I was like, okay, I'm leaving after my bonus. So I like worked hard until October, got my bonus in December. I went on vacation. I got back that day. I gave my notice,
And that's pretty brave, I just want to say, because I've heard from so many people that they get on like the golden handcuffs, like the bonus train, where they're like, well, I'll just wait until after my bonus. And then they get to January and they're like, but this year I'm like going to get a huge raise. So I'll just wait for like the next bonus. And then it's like 10 years go by and they're just like, what happened? Right. So it's amazing that you were able to like commit to that. And you were like, this is my plan. I'm sticking to it. And I mean, how did it feel when you went in there that day and were like, I'm sorry, but I'm done, right?
I think also what you said about that is like, I think it helped me I told everyone in my life I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way it was kind of like holding myself accountable. Like I've told everyone, now I have to follow through with it. And that really helped, even though I think I was strong enough in the conviction that I was going to do it. But I think that was like, that helped. And if I was giving someone a tip, that would be a tip. But yeah, it's funny, when I gave notice to my boss, he was so sweet and he was so good to me, and I really loved him. And I remember like my first day of work, I remember how nice he was to me. And I remember thinking, oh my God, one day he's going to be so disappointed when I quit. And it's so funny because 7 years later, when I went to his same office, I really felt that fear, and I do remember like feeling like everyone was going to think I was insane because I was the youngest person in my group. I was 32, and most people were 20 years older plus, and I felt like they were all going to think I was crazy. And some of them I think did like nicely couched it, but but a few of them, especially some men that I was kind of surprised about, because I worked with a lot of men, were like, I could see their eyes of like envy and just like, oh my God, you're doing the right thing. And I remember saying to one of them, like, and if it doesn't work out, I like could come back, even though that wasn't what I felt in my heart. But I remember just saying that. And I remember him being like, you're never coming back.
And yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. But so tell me a little bit about what happened after that, right? So you quit, and like what was kind of like the next step for you? Like, did you immediately start writing? Like, did you start submitting things? Like, what happened after that?
So I took like a good 6. So to back up, when I had said that I really wanted to be in warm environments, I feel like I'd traveled a lot in my life, and my travel bug was like very high then. And so I had decided to backpack around the world for a year or two, and then like figure out where I was going to live after, which was not going to be Chicago. So I left in a carry-on backpack with all my possessions, and it was like so wild to go from my Chicago apartment that felt so crammed and cluttered with stuff I didn't even like need or want, and then to just be so pared back. And it was pretty terrifying. I remember being on the plane to Thailand. That was the first place I went by myself. And I just remember thinking, like, who am I going to say my next words to? What am I doing? Like, I felt like excited, but very scared. I had so much, very scared about like where I was going to land. And I think that was also a time in my life where I like had a lot of health issues, and like health stuff. Like also, I think my whole life until now, I felt tired. Like now I feel so amazing. It's wild how different I feel. But so I think I was like tired and burnt out, and I just wanted time off. So I took like 6 months and didn't write at all. And then I wrote a book like 6 months after I started traveling, and that became my first book that was published in 2021. And I've written 6 books since then. But yeah.
So exciting. So I remember, so you and I know each other from living in Israel, where I lived also for 5 years. And I remember when you were writing that book, and when you were editing that book, and when you were pitching to agents. And I remember the time before you had the agent. So like, was it what you expected? I mean, in terms of how long it took you to get it off the ground, and how long it took you to get published, and what was it like going through? I mean, I know there was some rejection along the way, right? Like, how did you emotionally deal with that and persevere, even though, it wasn't like, right away, everything started happening?
Wow. Okay. Definitely right away, everything didn't start happening. I mean, it took so much longer than I wanted to or expected or hoped. But it's so like, looking back, it's so beautiful how just everything truly does happen for a reason, and how much I grew as an author because of all the very, very, very many rejections I've gotten, and honestly continue to get. Like at any stage of your career as a creative, you're getting, if it's not rejections from a publisher, it could be from like a magazine that your publicist pitches you for. So there's just so much rejection at every stage. I think it's like, I think I've learned to really, not just learn, I think I really believe in myself so much that stuff phases me less now. But yeah, I think that was like a much harder thing for me at the beginning and it wasn't the first, this book I wrote, like right when I started traveling, was like the 5th book I'd ever written. So it wasn't my first book at all. And I like was submitting it and not getting agents, and I kept revising it, and I kept realizing there were things wrong with it. Like that book, I'd like to call my masterclass on how to write a book, because I probably threw out like 200,000 words in the writing of that book. And it was like humble pie. Just like every time I got criticism, just like, okay, I could see that, and taking it. And, and then I remember it was like, I think it was nearly 2 years after I wrote that book, and I'd been editing it still, and I hadn't got an agent. And I remember I like had a moment with myself of just like, okay, hasn't happened yet. Maybe it's never going to happen, but I love doing this so much. I'm never going to stop trying. I'm always going to keep writing, and like letting it go a little bit. I remember that like relief kind of like, okay, I don't really have control over it. Okay. And I got my agent 2 weeks later. And and I've been working with her for now. Yeah, I think 4.5 years, but
That's incredible. Just being able to be like, this, I don't have control over whether someone says yes or no to this, but at the same time, this is what I'm meant to be doing and I'm never going to give up. And I always think about that when, like, in my own journey, like with, starting my own business, when I hit frustrations, I always think about you and how you just were able to kind of like persevere and like let that go, because that's not something, it wasn't negotiable for you. Like, it was just like, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. I'll make it work. And it did work, right? And that's what was so beautiful about your story. And I think just like that lesson of how can you let go when you're so scared and when you're so nervous and when maybe like finances are starting to run out, right? Like, how did you deal with that? What are some words of advice you might give to somebody in that situation?
I really believe that our desires are safe guidance. Like, I believe that when we truly want something, that it's safe to follow it. And so, I mean, the logic part of my mind, like, did have my legal career to fall back on. I knew, even though now I live in Israel, so that's much harder to be an American lawyer. But I did feel like I had that safety net. But I think like bigger than that, I have a very like big and close relationship with God, the universe, whatever you want to say. Like, I do have a lot of faith. And I think just like feeling how deeply this is always, like, I've always known this to be my calling. It was like, okay, I'm just going to keep following it. And maybe I'm gonna have to get a different job. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I didn't really know, but I also knew it wasn't wrong to be following it. Like, I feel like I've known that this path was accurate. So
that's amazing.
I'm not going to say it's not hard though. Like, I feel like, yeah, going off on this kind of journey is not, it's certainly not like the secure, like, stay at the law firm forever path, but like, God, I'm so glad that's not my path.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously now you love what you do, right? But I'm assuming that there are days where you're like, I don't feel like writing, or you mentioned that you've had some like health issues. Like, how do you, especially as someone who now works for themselves, where there aren't necessarily like structures in place or set hours, like, how do you tell us a bit about your work-life balance and like how you ensure that you're still taking care of yourself as somebody who is a motivated author? And especially you like, most of the time you do like what you do. So how do you also take care of the other parts of yourself?
Yeah. I think I'm really good at this, honestly, because especially as my health got better a few years ago, I just had more energy. So it's easier, I think, when you have more energy to put in place like the habits you want. But I meditate twice a day for 20 minutes. I walk like barefoot on the beach. I live next to the beach twice a day for like half an hour, usually like first thing in the morning and then at like sunset. I work out, I walk a lot. I feel like I cook for myself and I like to eat healthy food. Like, I feel like it's very important for me to take care of myself. I think because I know how deeply it affects my health and how different I feel when I do it. But yeah, it just feels like that's how I stay in alignment with myself. So I think I have good habits. Like, and actually I read the James Clear habit book a few years ago, and that really helped me cement some like good habits. But I've meditated twice a day for 20 minutes for like 10 years. So that I would say is like a big thing for me. But yeah, I think I'm good at taking care of myself. And also what you said about like that sometimes I do work that I don't want to do. I have to say that it's rare. Like, I feel very like I'm not a writer who writes every day. And I don't believe like really enforcing things. So I would say like there's a difference between sometimes like it's hard at the beginning of a project to sit down at your computer and get the words out. Like, so that is like a butt in the chair moment for me. But I do feel like I'm pretty good in flow with like, because I just think that everything is better when you're like enjoying doing it. So I try to like wait to do things until I'm really going to feel like I'm going to enjoy them. I mean, obviously some parts of the process are like a little bit less enjoyable. So for sure. But I still feel like sometimes if I wait,
I'm sure you still get to use your lawyer skills when you read your contracts now. But at least these are fun contracts, right? Where they're like, we're going to pay you to write this book.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's true. I do get to like flex my legal muscles sometimes.
So what would you, if somebody listening to this is sort of in this position where they're like working in a job where they just like know that they're not really aligned with where they're at, but there are all sorts of like fears and worries and constraints going on, what's like the one biggest piece of advice that you would give them?
I mean, I've heard, I don't know if it's Eckhart Tolle who said this, but that if you're like thinking about doing something, it's always like better to say yes than to say no. Like it's always better to try it than say no. I really think that at the end, like of our days, we regret the things we didn't try. And I think it's like less, usually if you try something, if it doesn't work, it leads you to the next thing, I don't think there's, and I was just, with a girlfriend today who also like left a news anchoring job where she was like pretty high powered and left it to become a meditation teacher. And we were both, and we were saying how like anyone we know who's done that kind of thing, it never fails. Like they might move on to something else, but I don't think it's ever like a failure. You know what I mean? I think we like think catastrophically and like we're going to be like out homeless on the streets. I mean, I obviously can't guarantee anything for anyone, so everyone has to like follow their own path. But I just really feel like if there's a true calling inside, like I really feel like your desires are safe and that you can try to follow them. And also that that any stories we make up about you can't go back to a job or you can't go back, it's like, that's all made up. I feel like,
Or like that story about you can't have any gaps in your resume. Have you heard that one? That's a great one.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all
Nobody cares. Nobody cares about that gap in your resume.
There's so many more possibilities open to us than we like think, with our limited kind of sometimes view. And so I think like, yeah, I think the world is open to us, but we have to like step out and try, and that's like the hard part. And I think I've said to you once that my favorite quote is like, you don't leap from A to B, you leap from A. And I feel like that's what I did. I remember when I got on the plane, it was like, I had no clue what I was like going into, but I had no clue I was going to end up in Tel Aviv where I'm so happy and it feels so home to me. And, but it's like the B part, like I couldn't control, like it kind of came. And that's like the faith piece, I think.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for all of those words of wisdom and for sharing your story. And I just want to ask you, like, where are you at right now? What are you working on? Like, tell us about this book that's coming out. I know that it's like available for pre-sale right now. Like, how can people get in touch with you? How can they follow you?
Well, I'm great. I have so many exciting things going on career-wise right now. It kind of blows my mind. Like it's kind of like funny. Like I've just been a little bit head down the past years of just like writing my books and now it's like really things are moving forward. And I have, well, I write mystery thrillers now. So my first mystery thriller is coming out from Simon and Schuster, Atria in May. And so there's so much exciting stuff going on. I was just announced on Goodreads list of most anticipated thrillers. And I have such an amazing like marketing and publicity team. And we're selling the foreign rights for that and like talking to film agents. And
So cool.
and my next book after that is going to come out in May of 2024. So I like finished that, working on final edits of that. I'm working on the book that's going to come out in 2025. And so like my agent's also selling a kids book for me, which would be really cool. I would like to write a kids series. So yeah, like so much is going on and I still have like such bigger dreams now. And it's cool how it like, but I really, I guess it's like we never lose the desires in our life, right? To keep like going. But I do like stop and take in how many dreams I've already like achieved. And so cool. And
It's amazing. I mean, you're the real deal, my friend. It's just incredible. So, and how can people get in touch with you? Like, what if where's the best place to reach you, to see your books, to see your offerings? How can they find you?
JaclynGoldis.com. Can pre-order my book. and message me there. And yeah, I do like a little book coaching sometimes. Sometimes I teach workshops, but yeah, that's the best place.
That's so awesome. I just love everything that you're up to, everything that you're doing. Is there anything else that I didn't mention or ask you that you wanted to share with this group of ambitious career women who are looking for balance and purpose in their lives?
I don't think so, but I'm like cheering you all on. I feel, I don't know, I feel like there's so much power also in like us all visualizing for each other, like, these dreams being possible and these dreams coming true. I feel like I have that like, um, crew in my life who like really like you, who really believes in me and believes in my dreams. And I think that's important to surround yourself with people like the people in this group. I think that um, if you're thinking about making a change and trying something that's maybe like less traditional in the eyes of the world, it's like great to have people doing the same kinds of things and kind of normalizing it. If you don't have people and if you only have people in your life like with traditional beliefs, I think it's harder to like kind of foster your own, so
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. That
Yeah.
makes so much sense. And also just getting support from people and having that energy around you, that positive
Yeah.
energy of people who believe in you. Obviously, we see what happens when those manifestations come to fruition right here. So thank you so much, Jaclyn. I really appreciate everything. And I'm so sorry about like the Facebook Live
Oh,
fiasco in the beginning. So I'm glad that we got this recorded. I know a few people were able to join. So thank you for joining live if you're here. I'm going to put this recording will get posted in the group so that others can actually still watch the replay. And yeah, I am just so happy to have had a chance to interview you. You are just like such a role model for me. I love everything that you've done. Can't wait to read your book.
you're the best. Thank you so much for having me. This is like so fun. And honestly, when I talk about like cheerleaders and people doing the same thing that like, that we kind of feed each other, I really feel that with you. And I so believe in what you're doing with this group. I think it's amazing.
Thank you so much, my dear. Well, have a good evening where you are. And I hope you have warmer weather than what we have over here. You made the right decision to move to the beach. And I will talk to you soon.
Yes, talk to you soon. Thanks, dear.
Take care.